Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar this morning, getting started with multi-cloud security for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. We're going to wait a few minutes for people to continue to join. We're going to put you on hold for just 2 minutes, and we'll be right back. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar, getting started with multi-cloud security for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. My name is Thelen Blum. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome9, and I'm here with Patrick Pusher, our Director of Customer Advocacy for Dome9. A multi-cloud strategy enables organizations to leverage best-of-breed technologies from a variety of innovative infrastructure-as-a-service vendors while ensuring flexibility, scalability, cost savings, and data protection. The shift to a multi-cloud adoption is a critical milestone where complete visibility of network security and compliance is even more crucial to ensuring your cloud environments are locked down. In today's webinar, Patrick is going to discuss how the Dome9 Arc SaaS platform allows enterprises to easily manage the security and compliance of their multi-cloud environments from a central console at any scale across Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. Dome9 Arc offers technologies to visualize and assess security posture, detect misconfigurations, model and actively enforce gold standard policies, protect against attacks and insider threats, and comply with regulatory requirements and best practices. We will close with a Q&A at the end of the session. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of GoToWebinar, and Patrick will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. We also have a copy of the Dome9 Arc product brief attached that you can feel free to download at any time during the webinar. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Patrick. Let's get started.
Thank you, Thelen, and really thank you everybody for joining us. We know we have a lot of mind share on the webinar today, and so we value your time. So as Thelen suggested, really our goal today is to talk about the challenges inherent with a multi-cloud strategy. Dome9 participates in a regular yearly survey around what sort of challenges our customers and our prospects face as they adopt infrastructure as a service platforms. And you know, even within a single cloud strategy, the challenge can be daunting. And we think about the kinds of things that people tell us, you know, that keep them up at night as they think about this move from the proprietary data center to the cloud. Visibility always reigns in, at least in the top two, and visibility can mean, you know, different things to different people. But I think when we think about multi-cloud strategies, visibility takes on even maybe a more comprehensive meaning than a single. Whether you're considering multi-cloud for reasons, as we suggested at the start of the webinar, right, sort of the best of breed functionality from each respective platform, vendor independence, it doesn't really matter why, the challenge remains the same, and that is keeping your security control, your security situational awareness, as I like to call it, static and well understood across, not static, but well understood and similar across disparate platforms, right? When we think about even the notion of a security group, which is sort of a firewall as a service, that really varies between the platforms we suggested at the start: Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. So, the concepts conceptually are a little bit different. How you implement them certainly are different. So it only sort of makes sense that visibility into these concepts it remains a challenge in a cross-platform, multi-cloud sort of way. Compliance certainly is the second most visible challenge that we hear about, and just like visibility, I think compliance, whether you're in a regulated industry or whether you are seeking sort of the ability to test what's important and measure what's important internally for your organization, oftentimes just to prove that security is a significant and important tenet to your stakeholders. Compliance across disparate platforms, again, is a very, very big challenge. And then just keeping that security situational awareness in setting your consistent security policies kind of rounds out typically the top three we hear about. When we combine that with the different sorts of use cases or groups or communities of interest that consume infrastructure as a service platforms, there too we see, some different concerns from an operational perspective. We think about that what's now becoming somewhat of a traditional sort of SecOps discipline within infrastructure as a service. This is the team that handles the day-to-day securing of these platforms. We have a lot different challenges than we faced in the proprietary data center days, where just about everything we established that sort of appeared as a service to our user community, those who are consuming these resources, now to us as internal IT teams truly are as a service, right? We're doing much more than spinning up instance-based or virtual machine-based workloads. We are consuming services across these platforms. And so keeping, a unified view of the current status of our security controls, how these controls relate to each other across multiple platforms remains a real key challenge. Things like, user permissions, open, sometimes dynamically, sometimes statically, open network service ports, that sort of thing. As different business units consume cloud resources in different ways, keeping this, even to be honest, even within a single cloud platform is a challenge, and then that challenge widens, of course, as we think about multiple platforms. We talked a little bit about compliance and governance in the last slide, and one of the reasons this is such a challenge is really the dynamic nature of these platforms, right? Now we have some capability to consume services in different ways, to integrate them in automated ways, as the last bubble in this slide suggests, the DevOps, or maybe more appropriately the DevSecOps discipline of automating the security around these disparate services. Again, much more than virtual machines or workloads. So depending on who you are, kind of where your concern lies, your challenges are different. And again, that just gets sort of multiplied as we think about doing this consistently across more than one platform. So in response to this is really the purpose or the reason behind Dome9, and we brand the service. Dome9 is software as a service platform, a security orchestration platform, I often think of it as, for security and compliance across public cloud environments, maybe more specifically infrastructure as a service environments. And it really is a reimagining of what cloud-native infrastructure as a service, security service should offer. And that cloud-native should probably actually be bold, right? what we do is a little bit different than other solutions you'll see that claim to secure, especially multi-cloud solutions that claim to secure services, right? Often those kinds of solutions will have you install something in an environment, an appliance, or most often an agent in a workload, and that's sort of how they claim to be multi-cloud aware. While I suppose that's true in one small sense, for us the vision is quite a bit wider. What drove us to the cloud in the first place is often this, this temptation of being able to consume what we used to build within virtual machines or physical machines, if we go back far enough, as a service. Think about hosted or databases as a service, operating systemless or serverless functions, those kinds of things. That's what attracts us to the cloud. So when we think about, the necessity or the dependency of running agents and workloads, that only gets us so far. And so for Dome9, our solution and our perspective on the problem is that integrating into each platform we support at a deep API level is how we really deliver on the visibility that our customers and our prospects continually tell us they need. So really, there's sort of three disciplines or capability areas of focus within Dome9, and we'll mostly focus today on the network security side and the compliance and governance side. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about IAM protection, but in the multi-cloud sort of scenario, I think we'll probably have enough to talk about on the network security and compliance and governance side. And those two certainly remain the biggest challenges that we hear consistently. So we brand the Dome9 family ARC, and then ARC stands for Assess, Remediate, and Control. And we talk a little bit already about the importance of visibility into many things, but we'll focus today on the current state of our security controls, our security situational awareness, if you will, understanding that security posture in the face of the need for dynamic change, right? The fact that all of these platforms are really driven by software control means that we have far more capability than we did back in the proprietary data center days. With that capability, however, comes a lot of potential for change. Add to that the different use cases of different projects, different business units within your organization, and we have a never static, always changing software-driven infrastructure set that remains difficult to control, to sort of remain trusted over time over all these different use cases and the exceptions that we invariably have to handle. And so the assessment part remains absolutely critical, right? We can't secure what we don't understand, what we don't really have confidence in, and so the assessment is the first part of that ARC bucket. Remediation, of course, is the next piece. Monitoring can get you so far. It can certainly tell you what's wrong, where you do differ from that desired trusted state. But in our eyes, no solution is complete until we think about how to fix the problems we find as well. And so within Dome9, there are several places where we will look at as we get to the demo portion of the webinar, where we can have a guided process towards remediation of the problems we find. And then the last bucket being control, making sure that what we find, fix, stays fixed over time, right? Once we understand exactly where we deviate from that desired state, once we fix it, how do we ensure that we never go back to that state where we lose confidence in our security posture? So it's really these three buckets that each Dome9 feature fits into, and that's what we'll focus on today. So why Dome9? We've alluded to this a few times already within the webinar, but there's really sort of a few key pillars of what's important around Dome9, how we differentiate the solution from others you might see in the industry. Because we integrate deeply at that API level to all the platforms we're going to talk about today, and there is no dependency on data that you load in your environment in the way of appliances that filter traffic or agents that sit inside workloads, you can get started very, very easy. we have on the slide here, deployment in under 5 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration, right? So you're building policy, you're connecting Dome9 to be able to read and control in some instances as well via that API to either AWS, Microsoft Azure, or the Google Cloud Platform. It means nothing to install, and it means that you can be up, running. Dome9 can understand your environment and the breadth of that environment in a very, very short period of time. Next, under the middle sort of powerful category here, we've also talked about how important it is to be able to not just understand the deviations in your policy and have maybe even recommendations for how to fix it, but to be able to fix it in line, in the tool, in the same interface, right? That may be somewhat overused, but still very prudent, single pane of glass kind of approach. So too, with that remediation, we'll consider more than just network security. We're going to talk about compliance and governance. We're going to talk about identity, a little bit about identity and access management. These are all related, right? Who can do what across each control plane is very important. And so we'll talk a little bit about how identity, proving kind of who you are, control of Dome9 through both interactive means, kind of what we'll look at within the platform here today, but also API-driven pragmatic control for those use cases like DevOps, right, where we're looking at leveraging the software control inherent in each of these platforms in an automated fashion. Identity becomes very key there as well. What we don't want to do is do things like embed credentials inside of scripts, so we have solutions for that as well. And then comprehensive, because we have that API-driven perspective, we can Dome9 can see quite a bit more than your workloads and your virtual machines, and the firewalls protecting those. Right now, we look at securing services, non-traditional ways of consuming IT. Dome9 also has perspective out over and can secure as well. And we talked a little about API-based control. We'll get to that very soon again. So enough of the theoretical sort of slide-driven content. Let's hop into the Dome9 platform and deeper dive. So this is your Dome9 dashboard, and across the top you'll see that the relationship between cloud account, again more specifically infrastructure as a service account, to Dome9 account is many to one. So in this demo environment we have support for 2 Amazon Web Services accounts, 1 Microsoft Azure account, and 1 Google Platform account. And you're likely aware that depending on these platforms, they all work a little bit differently, but many of them have somewhat of a jailed kind of interface, right, where you log in with 1 account and you're presented with the perspective over 1 region. And most Dome9 customers come to Dome9 with a challenge somewhat to do with the scale of what they're trying to do in 1 or more of these platforms, right? And there's a bit of a magic number. We find that organizations who are just dipping their toes in the infrastructure as a service world typically can manage, the security group to instance to service relationship, but at a certain amount of scale, and that's different for every organization. That management becomes a little more difficult in the face of some of the initiatives we've already talked about. Automated control, further adoption over time. Quite quickly, the same things that brought us to these platforms, right? The getting out of the procurement cycle, being able to scale very quickly. The reasons that drove us to these platforms are the same reasons that make securing them difficult. And so, just know that you can come to Dome9 and connect as many cloud accounts as you have to your single Dome9 account, add all of your trusted users to Dome9, and then have a very, as you can see within the Dome9 dashboard here, have a very unified perspective around really all of your security controls, all the services. Make that a little bit more clear. You can see that again we have 4 accounts connected to this single Dome9 demo account. And when you add an account to Dome9, you have a choice whether to do so in read-only mode, and that gives you that more traditional monitoring-only perspective. And even there, we've got some capability that that gives you a certain richness of information, of detail, that provides a lot of value. But on the flip side, you can also connect an account in what we call read-write. And with read-write, what you're doing is you're giving Dome9 some limited ability, and I say limited because it's not all or nothing, right? You don't give Dome9 complete permission to do anything you want in any of these accounts. It has to do with the kind of scope that Dome9 supports. But you give Dome9 the ability to write back, either directly through your use of the product via the API or the console, or on your behalf. And so some of the things that we can do on your behalf have to do with concepts like tamper protection, where you set up your master policy, and then through that sort of ARC workflow we talked about, assessing visibility, understanding your current state, remediation, fixing the problems kind of uncovered by that visibility, and then the control state, really keeping that condition fixed over time. Tamper protection definitely falls in that third bucket, that control, and that's just an example of one of the features that requires that write back kind of permission. So just know that two different permission models depending on your intended use of Dome9, and it's quite typical for customers to begin the relationship with Dome9 in read-only. And if that's kind of all you need throughout the life cycle of your use of Dome9, that's great. But quite often that will shift over time to, as organizations get to know Dome9 and our approach to security in general, they'll convert those relationships from read-only to read-write, and then leverage some of those features that they find valuable. So if we think about, again, the ARC, the ARC family of features and capabilities within Dome9, under assessment, really, none strikes that that visibility chord quite as well for me as a feature we have called Clarity. And Clarity is your Visio diagram-like map across the networks you manage within any of these platforms. Clarity supports all of the platforms that we've suggested so far today, and it really illustrates for you all of the potential traffic flows within any given cloud network. And so if I dig into our demo account, we have a demo sort of prod environment here that I'll choose. I'll drill down towards a specific region. In this case, for this is an AWS account. And then what you'll see first is all of the different VPCs that exist within this account and the relationships between them. And so you can see here, for example, we have a somewhat familiar sort of hub and spoke architecture here, where I've got several different VPCs with peering relationships towards a central one here. And this, this central VPC might handle my ingress and egress traffic to the internet, for example. And then each of these separate VPCs could be a different tier of my application. That's just one sort of sample use case behind the architecture. But really, Clarity gives you this this relationship, if any exists. I think if we go down here a little bit, we'll see some islands as well, where these are VPCs that really have no relationships to others through the lack of peering connections. But we'll pick a particular VPC. In this case, it's our main. On the way in, we have some high-level stats around what to expect within this network, but we'll choose a specific view here, in this case, security group view. And the second view that Clarity is going to provide for us is this automatic ranking of our security groups in one of the swim lanes that are color-coded across the top. We see we have DMZ, partially open, effectively internal, and the internal zone. And this is applicable for every platform. We'll take a look at a Google Cloud Platform illustration within Clarity in just a moment. But in this case, what we've got are security groups ranked in this exposure to the outside sort of fashion. What that means is that this illustration took no setup on a Dome9 user's part, and really what's happened is through that deep API integration, Dome9 has understood each firewall rule set in each security group and ranked it in one of these swim lanes. And so just the very fact that I have two security groups in this DMZ swim lane means that each of these security groups has one or more rules that are very, very permissive to the outside. So for example, if I click on my load balancer security group and I look over in my right-hand detail pane, I can see that it's the secure web HTTPS port that is open to the entire internet. And it's that kind of exposure that really ranks it again in this DMZ swim lane. That's not necessarily a problem, but it's certainly a problem if you don't know it exists there. And so that's the intention of Clarity, is to make sure you understand what's at the edge of your network, really accepting broad internet-based traffic, versus what's tucked neatly back in the internal zone, private, away from prying eyes. So I've got my load balancer security group here. Dome9 has done a good job of highlighting exactly which rule or rules offend in terms of ranking it in the DMZ. And so for a load balancer, you can almost see or reason why this is here, right? It's sort of a load balancer's job to take very broad traffic, judge it, and send it deeper into your network. The fact that I have a default security group here is very troubling. And if I click on that, I can see that it's this secure shell, all access kind of any rule again that exists there, and that's why that default security group is in my DMZ swim lane. That's a problem, but so too is the fact that I have a number 1, and I'll zoom this up a bit if you can't see as well. I have a number 1 in the top right of this security group. What that means is I've got one resource assigned to that security group, and in this case, it's a database server. So I've got, just by first glance at my Clarity illustration, I've got some real challenges here. One, I'm using a default security group that I really shouldn't, right? It's a best practice that I shouldn't use this at all. I've got it populated with rules, which is bad enough, but then I've also got a resource assigned to it, a database server. So this is a definite problem, and Clarity makes it very, very simple to see. Working to the right-hand side, these security groups in the partially open swim lane mean that I've got some internet exposure, some public network exposure, but not nearly as broad as the DMZ. So these may be security groups like my monitoring security group that are accepting traffic from resources outside my network. That might be by design, it might not, but the fact that they're here, again, if I saw my database server security group in anywhere but the internal zone, that would be room for quite a bit of concern. And so Clarity does a really good job of ranking all this information at a glance. And as you can see as I work through it, when I click any given security group, I can see exactly where traffic's permitted to flow in through the orange color coding, and where traffic's permitted to flow out through that blue color coding. In this case, I can accept traffic from 4 different, in this case, these are what we call IP lists. You also see a raw IP address down here. IP lists are Dome9 conventions that allow you to group raw IP addresses or ranges and give them English names, English labels, really enhancing the understandability, the readability of information within Clarity and within the Dome9 audit trail. So, it's very easy for me to understand where traffic's coming in and where traffic's permitted to flow out. And I've got my database server security group that we've referred to a few times here tucked away nice in my internal zone, but I've already determined that although I have 3 different resources assigned to this database server security group, DB1, DB2, and a database as a service, an RDS instance called MySQL RDS1, so too do I have one of these assigned to my default security group, DB1. If that isn't clear, we do have a different view that we won't go over today that gives you that what we call effective policy view, where I can tell exactly what's kind of got more than one security assignment assigned to it. As you likely know, I can take a database server, and that's exactly what's happened here, and assign it to more than one security group. And that's what's happened to DB1. I've taken DB1, assigned it as I should properly to the DB server security group, but somehow it's also been assigned to this default security group. And the way that, in this case, AWS combines these rule sets means that I've got unintended data exposure. And that's really the whole intention of Clarity. So this was an AWS example. Let me show you just how consistent this look and feel and really the information that Clarity gives you is. If I pull back to my GCP Google Cloud Platform account and I dig into a particular network here, although it changes a little bit, I've got now the ability to do the very same thing on a whole different platform. And that really is the goal, isn't it? Looking at an interface that's consistent across different technology providers helps me understand, if I'm doing similar things in different platforms, it's directly applicable. But even if I'm not, if I'm taking data from one cloud network on AWS, for example, and I'm consuming it within a different network on an entirely different provider, this allows me to be able to ensure the whole path that data takes is secure. and that nothing has changed from the last time that I've really dug in with clarity and looked at the state of my security controls. So very, very similarly, in this case, we're not looking quite at security groups, we're looking at more of an effective policy view. So here I've got, in my DMZ, I've got a group of 3 different resources, kind of tagged the way that GCP groups resources and even firewall rules is by tag. And so here, again, we've got a slightly different take on how this gets implemented within a different platform, yet we have a visual representation that's very, very similar across providers. And that's the goal, right, of course, of each Dome9 feature that's multi-cloud enabled. So we've talked about that assessment bucket, the visibility that that Dome9 delivers. Clarity is only one feature that really speaks to that challenge. It's certainly, when I think about visibility, right, it's the one I think about always at first. But when we think about the kind of detail we need to know to have trust in our policy going forward, we get into that more the governance side, right? Ensuring that I can express what's important to me organizationally or what I'm mandated to be concerned about through a regulation in a way, certainly it falls under what we call the compliance engine. And the Dome9 compliance engine is really an effort to be able to take either off-the-shelf existing data security standards or best practices from our technology integration partners and run those in a very easy and straightforward way. So new Dome9 customers have access to all of these what we call bundles of rules that have to do with existing data security standards, PCI, HIPAA high-tech, and the less formal but still very much prudent CIS benchmarks, and then again our best practices from our technology partners as well. So, just by virtue of being integrated very deeply at that API level, we have the ability to offer these to our customers, within, again, 5 minutes of onboarding. However, as many of you know, I'm sure, if you've gone out and used products that offer sort of pre-canned compliance bundles or pre-canned rules, there are always some assumptions in the interpretations of these measurements which may not be entirely accurate for how you use these platforms. Not only that, they're going to be at a level of detail that may not be specific enough for your usage. So, for example, many of these data regulations say that you must segregate networks that have, personally identifiable data in them from other networks that don't, or other networks that are publicly accessible. How you do that, in many cases, there's a variety of ways, but how many customers do it are by tag. So any pre-existing data security standard is not going to measure the tags that you have implemented in your environment. So with Dome9, it's a little bit of the best of both worlds. I can take a bundle, for example, and I can clone that into something that I can then further edit, right? So if I take let's take something a little bit smaller and manageable. If I take a best practice bundle and it's got 22 different measurements here, I can clone that into a copy of this for one that I can edit. So I can take what we have off the shelf and clone this, and we'll just call this Patrick Webinar Bundle. We'll clone it. It exists down here, and when I select it, now I can go into each rule. I can dig into exactly what it's trying to do, and I can augment it with further tags if I'd like. And we've established a domain-specific language. We call it GSL, or governance-specific language, that allows you to write rules, read rules without a developer skill set. If you've had to do any sort of GRC work in whether it's back in the proprietary data center days or against an infrastructure as a service platform, you will likely be aware that writing your own rules traditionally has been an exercise that required a developer skill set, right? So taking an existing language, writing a rule typically takes between 50 and 200 lines of code. Within Dome9 GSL, you're able to express it in a near natural English sort of way that even the policy creator can, if not author themselves, certainly understand. And that's been the goal, right? If we think about the game of telephone that we likely all played as children, if we take a message and we pass it on down the line across 1, 2, 3, or more people, by the time it gets to the end, it's invariably different than the first party intended. And this is the challenge with a policy creator coming up with what's important from an organizational security perspective, translating that to a developer or a team of developers to implement a control that measures such. This way, the policy creator can actually write that rule off of the measurement within DOM9 themselves. And if you know the syntax of GSL, which is relatively straightforward, and as we suggested, there are many examples within DOM9, then straight away you can edit rules that way. If you don't, we have a guided process that we have called the Rule Builder that really allows you to pick the entity you want to measure and then walk through the building of a rule. So, we've used a lot of network security examples so far. Let's use something maybe more identity-based. Let's say I was interested in measuring whether my users, we'll pick AWS in this case, my users have MFA turned on, or maybe even more comprehensive, effective. My identity and access management policy should have MFA enabled. So from an account-wide perspective, I should have mandatory MFA enabled. It's that easy to write a rule, and as you can see, we'll sort of list each property and then each condition under each property that's possible as you build the rule using the DOM9 Rule Builder. So, both in the way that we have many examples set up in predefined rule bundles, and in the way that the Rule Builder helps you iteratively build compliance rules, it's easier than ever to really construct what's important to you, and again, either what's mandated to be important to you or what's important to you internally within your organization. So we'll back out a little bit, and let's take one of these rule bundles. In this case, we'll use a Google Cloud Platform sample bundle, and let's execute this across our accounts. In this case, it's going to be across our single Google Cloud Platform account that we have connected to our demo environment here. And as you can see, you can get a little more specific. If you want to run this regionally, if you want to run this against one network, you can do so. In this case, we're going to run it against the whole account. And if we had more than one account, you could run this against more than one account. Oh, in this case, we don't have very many failures, which is really good. This is a little bit new, certainly. But what this tells us is that everything that we've tested for has, and it's likely because our infrastructure here is not really sizable, right? There's only a limited amount of resources. Everything we've tested for has passed, which is great. And if we take a look at our rules, actually, let's go back to something where we've got some failures. Seems like we're doing very well on the GCP side, which is good. Let's run our Azure sample. And again, we'll choose our account. We'll hit run. We'll do this for every platform we support. We'll take a look at how they differ. In this case now, we've got a few more resources, and as such, we have a few more failures within our environment. So we've got just about an even pass-fail ratio. And now for each test in that bundle that we executed, and there was, I think, 22 of them, we will now list each one and the failures as well. So in this case, if we scroll down to something familiar here, so what we're doing in the second rule here is we're saying, okay, any virtual machine that has a security group protecting it that opens up the Microsoft SQL browser port wide to the whole internet, obviously should be flagged. We want to know about that when it happens. And out of 28 relevant resources, 28 virtual machines that fit this criteria, we have one that failed. And if we hit expand, we'll actually see which one that is. So I can click on this resource, and this will take me to a different portion of DOM9 where I can dig in. And oh, I see. Why this particular resource has failed is that we don't have any network security groups assigned to this resource. So we have a default policy of allow all, which is very, very important that we know as well. This is likely a misconfiguration. So what we tested for was, one specific service, and then what we found through digging into the results of the compliance engine assessment is that for this particular virtual machine or workload, we haven't done the appropriate level of security group assignment here. So let's go ahead and run then our bundle against AWS. And as you can see, we have our little graphical markers on each bundle, kind of what platform they're intended for. And let's run that across our prod account in this case. And here too, we have about an equal pass-fail ratio. And then as we scroll down through our individual tests, and we can do some filtering on the left-hand side as well across different services. We do support more services on the AWS side than we do on the rest of the platforms. We've sort of grown up on the Amazon Web Services side. The support for Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Platform is quite a bit newer. So you will find over time we're supporting more and more of the services offered from those platforms as well as more and more conditions. So on the AWS side, it stands to reason that we've got what we call validation types. Really what we're referring to are the different kind of services that the compliance engine can measure. And so if we filter for those, we can see the different kinds of tests we run against users and roles, for example, the different kinds of tests we run against hosted databases or databases as a service, or the different kind of tests we run across instances or workloads. So in this case, let's take our filter off. Let's look at just our failures, and let's look at our high severity failures. So here we can see, for example, some different kinds of tests. And in this case, for example, we have some database as a service that we've said, hey, every RDS instance that we have should be encrypted. We tested, so in this prod demo account, we have a total of 2 of them, and 2 of them are not. So we've got 2 different RDS instances that are not encrypted. And if I click them, I can dig a little bit further into them. And if you recall, when we looked at Clarity, we actually saw this, right? We looked at the DB server security group, which was in the internal zone, and we noticed that we had an RDS instance called MySQL RDS1. In this case, we're not measuring security group coverage. We're measuring through the compliance engine whether it was encrypted or not. But we can click on it. We can get a full status of where it resides, in which account, which region, which VPC. We can learn which security groups do protect it, for example, and get a deeper dive into the configuration of such. Within the network security menu drop-down, we can actually get this view in a different way as well, in a more aggregated way. We can choose protected assets. Let's hit reload. Or we can filter on this, right? We can say, okay, a similar way to find this information would be show me all of my RDS instances in my prod account, and there it is again. So, I found the deviation through the compliance engine, but then I might ask myself, geez, what are all of the, different RDS instances within my prod account, for example? Filtering down to that individual perspective is very, very straightforward. So as you'll notice, we jumped a little bit to what I consider the practitioner's view down below, each test and the results of each test. But up top, we've got more of an information and aggregate view, right? More suitable for the compliance officer or management who want to understand at an aggregate kind of level how we did on our compliance run, both in terms of overall pass-fail ratio, the severity of the tests we ran, the different sorts of entities that we tested. In this case, most of our rules, 66% of our rules, have to do with security groups, 20% have to do with instances, and then we have some identity and regional-based rules as well. We also have the ability, and this is why we really encourage users who are consuming or interested in the compliance perspective to have their own Dome9 account to be able to run this, because the reports are interactive, right? I'm able to look at it at a regional perspective how I did. And in this case, it looks like my Frankfurt region is quite a bit better from an overall pass-fail ratio than I am globally. Maybe that should be the model for what I do throughout the world. But there is certainly a way to share these with Dome9 users that that don't have accounts, right? Maybe this is a report that you want to run. Depending on how I want to produce that report and the information contained therein, I can do this, and we will create a nicely formatted PDF that you can take outside of Dome9 to share. So under compliance, when we think about the ability to drive these kinds of assessments, we're doing this interactively within the platform at the webinar today, but you can also do this pragmatically, sort of driven by API. And what many Dome9 customers do is that they might trip an assessment once a day, once an hour in highly agile, ever-changing environments, or they might run a Dome9 assessment conditionally, right? Maybe the start of a change window, they want to run one assessment. At the end of a change window, they via API, they reach out and they run a second assessment, and then that allows them to see if anything critical has changed as part of that change management window of activity. And so just know that you're watching me do this interactively, which is certainly a very, very popular way of controlling and using Dome9. But everything I've done in the webinar today, and in fact, everything you can do within the platform in the portal here, you can also do by API. Really, our portal is just a public extension of leveraging the Dome9 API, which means you can fit this into those DevOps or DevSecOps life cycles very, very easily. You don't have to change your process to accommodate the use of Dome9. Rather, Dome9 can fit into your existing process very, very well. So now we've used clarity. We've talked about understanding exactly in an interactive way through the Visio-like diagramming of all the different paths that network traffic can take, where traffic's allowed to flow, where it's not. Onto the use of the compliance and governance engine through Dome9, being able to attest for whatever's important to you across multiple cloud platforms. Now we'll talk about the C in that ARC family branding, right? The control. Once we understand what's wrong, what deviates from our desired state within our infrastructure as a service usage, how we keep it fixed. So from a network security perspective, when we went back to protected assets, rather if we look at security groups, which is a different, similar view, but now we're looking at that firewall as a service, right? That each platform provides. Maybe not a name. I don't think the security group name is used within Google Cloud. It's more of a firewall sort of tag relationship. But within Dome9, right, it's all presented as a similar kind of function, and certainly the searchability, as you can see on the left-hand side within the security group functionality, is here. And if we take a look at any given security group, now that we know we've got this architected the way we want, you'll notice a toggle up here called read-only versus full protection. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, where once you've got things designed the way you want, if you flip any given security group over to full protection, Dome9 will be consistently monitoring the configuration of the security group. And that happens at read-only as well. When deviations occur, and deviations could be somebody at the respective console, in this case AWS, maybe the first run of an automation script that you have that has the potential to change these settings. It doesn't matter how they happen, but when they happen, Dome9 will alert you to the fact. So let's say, for example, that I've got my secure shell service here. It's got a very limited scope. Let's say out of convenience I have a developer that somehow changes this outside of Dome9. Dome9 will catch that change and will make sure that in the way of an email alert or an alert routed through your SIM tool set of choice. In full protection, it'll do the same thing, but then it'll also revert the change it found back to the state that you told Dome9 is sort of your quote-unquote golden policy. So, let's say somebody tries to replace this limited scope with basically all, right? So not through Dome9, but maybe through the native console, they do something like this. They open it all for everybody, and I won't do that right now. Dome9 will see that, will alert you, but then will revert it back to the scope you have defined within Dome9. And that functionality is called tamper protection, and that's one of the ways that you can rest better at night, knowing that I've found the problems, I fixed them, and now I never have to worry about that configuration drift happening again. right? Because we know through the life cycle of firewall management, there are always exceptions to handle. There are always other business drivers that really enforce the necessity to change over time. But what we don't want to happen is let these exceptions become the rule. So through tamper protection, we're really able to take a step back, ensure that nobody or nothing can change our sort of mandated golden policy going forward. So we've moved really, really quickly through, through the multi-cloud enabled usage of Dome9. There's lots we haven't got to that I'd love to take you through. We do deeper dive webinars into just the network security portion, just the compliance portion, and in fact, just the identity and access management portion as well. And so we'd love for you to do that, but in the meantime, I think we'll probably stop here and see if we have any questions.
Well, Patrick, it looks like we have received a few questions. The first one is, what access does Dome9 have to my data?
That's a good question, and we probably alluded to this a little bit earlier, but let's make it even more clear. Really, Dome9 has no perspective over the data you have in any workload protected by Dome9 or in any service that's protected by Dome9, right? So when you onboard, you give Dome9 a certain level of access into your account via that API connection. Right, and so that typically, again, you have the choice whether it's read-only or read-write. But even in read-write, it's really just the cloud operations, the cloud metadata, right? The ability, for example, as you saw, we just talked about, to secure a security group and to make sure that if changes happen, that Dome9 can revert them. That's as far as that permissioning goes. There's no credentials for databases. There are no credentials for workloads themselves. So there's a very clear delineation point around control of cloud platforms, but no access to data, which is a clear advantage for many of our customers.
The second question we've received is, do I have to share my root user credentials with Dome9 to be able to use the service?
Yeah, absolutely not. So I think you'll find if you've used other tools that provide you insight or even control into your infrastructure as a service accounts, you may be used to giving them usernames and passwords. That's not the case with Dome9 across any of these platforms. There's no credential exchange at all, so not only not your root user, but really nobody. What you're doing is you're using the native policy definition of each platform, and you are giving Dome9 very specific rights in the read-only sort of methodology or the full control read-write. You're saying, hey, Dome9, I want you to be able to read information around security groups, around instances, around users and their attributes. You are not giving actual usernames and passwords, especially to root accounts that have all-encompassing permissions. You remain in the driver's seat around how much access you want to provide to Dome9, and you do that in the cloud-native ways that exist to define that rights model, and then you give Dome9 that cross-account access into those policies that you set up on your behalf to be able to read the data and control.
Great. Well, thank you, Patrick. All right, everyone, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the email q&anda@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you enjoyed the webinar presented today and would like to experience the Dome9 ARC platform for yourself, we are offering a 14-day free trial. Please visit our website at www.dome9.com and click on the Get Started button on our home page. Just register and a representative from Dome9 will contact you to activate your free trial. Additionally, if you liked the webinar today and would like to hear more about the multi-cloud security solutions Dome9 provides, please visit our webinar page on the website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars, or go to www.dome9.com/webinars. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome9 webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.